Joining us now in studio is Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario NDP, running for re-election in Hamilton Centre. And welcome back to TVO.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, I want to start with the question that ironically has not much to do with provincial politics, but more to do with federal. But everybody's asking me about this, so I'm going to ask you. The results of the last federal election were obviously extremely good for the National and Democratic Party, and I wonder what you think that breakthrough for them portends for you.
Well, I don't know what it portends. I think the voters of Ontario will make their decision on October 6th, but I can tell you it's given us a lot of energy. Our party is very motivated at the provincial level. We've had great candidates come forward for us, so we have a fantastic slate of people running for us, and our volunteers are energetic and they're feeling very positive.
Is it possible that it means nothing at all?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I think that it already means something for the wind that it's put under our wings. So saying nothing at all, I would disagree with that. But how far you can translate actual numbers, I don't think you can. This is a different election. There are different issues, but certainly our team has been buoyed by what I call the federal success that we had in May.
There is, I presume, a fine line you have to walk here, which is that people, when they see you, want to talk about Jack Layton. I guess that's natural. And he was a friend of yours and a mentor and all of that. But I presume you have to be careful not to kind of exploit his name for your political benefit. How do you walk that tightrope?
Well, I don't invoke the name of Jack all that often myself. You're right, though. People still want to talk about him. And I think in some ways people want to connect with him through me, knowing that I knew him. And so I pretty much give people the respect of that opportunity and chat with them if they want to about Jack. But I try to use his words of inspiration, the ones he left New Democrats and all Canadians really in his final letter as a bit of a mantra for our campaign, just in terms of trying to stay positive and putting out the positive options that people have for real choice this time around.
Okay, let's look at things provincial. I don't know if you know this, but no rookie leader has won a majority government in Ontario in 40 years. So you are on a big learning curve here, Ms. Horwath, and I want to ask you, what's the biggest item on that learning curve so far?
The biggest item was probably having to stare at that bus with my 20-foot face on it. But in all seriousness,
on all sides of it, actually,
yeah,
it was everywhere.
But you know, it's been fabulous so far, I have to say. As I said, we're energetic and we're feeling pretty positive. There's new experiences. You know, day one kickoff was kind of challenging, and I think the next big challenge that I'm going to have is the debate, which is coming up the 27th, as you probably know. But I'm trying to stay focused on the message that we're giving to Ontarians in terms of the fact that they do have a choice this time around. They can choose the status quo that hasn't been working for them, or they can choose a party that puts people first for a change. And that's been my focus. And that's when I start to get nervous about these looming issues like the debate, I tend to get back to focusing on what my job is, which is to send our message out there, certainly tell people they do have a choice, but also let Ontarians get to know me a little bit better.
For those Ontarians who think experience counts, I've got to point out you've been the leader of the third place party with just 10 seats in the legislature for just a couple of years, over, I guess, 2.5 years. How do you convince people that that's adequate on-the-job training for what is, arguably, the second or third toughest job in Canadian politics?
Well, I've never shirked from a challenge, that's for sure. And I've spent a number of years on City Council in Hamilton, as you know, and a number of years in the legislature now, and a couple of years running the party and turning it around quite well in Ontario. And so I think that the choice people have to make is one that says, if you want change, you don't choose the same old, same old. And so this is an opportunity for people to say, geez, there is a different choice to be made this time around, and it's a viable choice. And again, I think I've risen to the challenges so far that I've set out for myself, and I'm looking forward to being in a place where I can implement the kind of changes we want to bring to Ontario.
Premier of Ontario is automatically a huge player on national unity issues. Do you know those issues well enough?
Well, you know, I could probably work on them a little bit more, but I don't see national unity as being all that big of an issue right now. I mean, let's face it, when we had the last federal campaign, we saw, you know, kind of a back seat in those issues, and we saw, you know, the NDP pick up a number of seats in Quebec on a nationalist agenda. And so I think that those issues will always be there. They'll be led by the federal party, obviously, but as you're right, as a premier of the biggest province, it's going to be an issue that that may rise up again in other ways, and I'm prepared to take that on if that does happen.
Certainly the separatist threat, we are told, from those looking on this side of the Quebec-Ontario line, is never that far away. And so I remember attending a breakfast at which you were asked this question, I guess a couple of months ago, and it was, do you support the federal NDP's position that 50% plus one is good enough to take Quebec out of Confederation? You didn't have an answer that day. What's your answer today?
Well, you know, it's not up to me to change the federal position on this issue. It's a position that's come to by the party and by the caucus, and so I'm not going to wade into to that decision that they've made. But what I will say is, I don't believe that looming threat is as present as it has been in past years. And if it starts to loom large again, then we'll deal with it at the time. But I think at this point we have an opportunity nationally to meld together the interests of our entire country, including Quebec. And I think Quebecers voted for taking that route for a change to see what might be able to be accomplished. And I'm proud of the work that our party did federally to make that happen.
Okay, let's talk about what has, I think, turned into the #1 issue of this Ontario election campaign so far, admittedly early days, and that is this plan by the Liberals to offer $10,000 subsidies for what they are calling new immigrants, what the Conservatives are calling foreign workers, to help them get some on-the-job experience. What's your view of that plan?
Well, you know, Mr. McGuinty brought forward a plan, and that's his responsibility as the leader. We brought forward a plan as well, but our plan is a bit broader. What we're offering is a $5,000 tax credit for companies that are hiring new people permanently, but that can be anybody. It can be new immigrants, but it also can be young people. It can be people who are transitioning, who have lost their other jobs through the recession and are still looking for work. We think that that's a way of getting everybody back into some employment. You can get up to 20% of wages covered to a maximum of $5,000 for every new hire. And again, not for contract positions, not for temporary positions, but for full-time permanent positions. And
were the Liberals wrong to target new immigrants with their plan?
Well, again, it's all about choices, and that's the choice that they made in their announcement. We've made a different choice, and that's one to realize and recognize that new Canadians, as well as all kinds of other folks, are desperately looking for work, and that's why we would rather put a plan forward that expands the pool instead of just has people fighting over the few jobs that exist.
The Conservative reaction to it, what'd you think?
Well, again, I'm not one that favors the war of words back and forth that we've seen with Mr. McGuinty and Mr. Hudak. The slinging back of insults, whether it's Tea Party, whether it's labeling of new Canadians as I can't even remember
foreign
what they're
workers.
And so for me, that's just more of the falling into the negativity and the angry back and forth sandbox kind of politics. I think people deserve something better. I think they deserve an honest debate about the problems people are facing and what solutions we're bringing to the table. Because when it becomes the fight against Mr. Hudak and Mr. McGuinty, then the people that are lost out are the people we should be paying attention to, which is everyday Ontarians.
I want to ask you about what you've done to your party. And by that I mean, I was listening to one of your radio ads the other day, and in the first thing that you mentioned in that radio ad was tax cuts for small business, which is a different approach for a New Democratic Party of Ontario. And in the intro, we suggested you want to, the 3 things you want to cut taxes on, which again is a different approach for the Ontario NDP. What's happened to your party?
Well, you know what? We've always been a party that's been concerned about everyday people and the affordability of everyday life. I mean, some people used to say we were the party for the underdog or the party for the little guy. Let's face it, Ontarians are very worried about the affordability of everyday life. They see their paychecks aren't increasing, but their bills certainly are. So we've put a platform together that has different choices in it, focusing on making life more affordable, creating new jobs for people, and changing our priorities in the healthcare system. Because these are things that people are telling me are important. And so I don't think it takes us all that far off track. When it comes to small business, we know that small business is creating a lot of jobs in Ontario. That's where the economy is going. And so it would be silly not to support small business if we see that value.
I hear you, but in the mid-1990s, when Mike Harris was in power and tax cuts were all the rage, many New Democrats were saying Mike Harris's championing of tax cuts so much has demonized the whole notion that we pay taxes because we get something back in return for them. And those people, I think, fear that by your continuing to sort of beat the drum for tax cuts, that you're encouraging people to look at taxes as evil rather than what we pay to pay for services. What's your view on that?
Well, I think it's a little bit more specific than that. I think that what we're looking for, what I'm hoping to do, is create a more fair system in Ontario. What we have now is across the board blank checks that are given to companies who are shipping jobs out of Ontario, and we're paying for them on the backs of everyday families with the harmonized sales tax. Everyday families need to have their bottom line helped for a change. And so we're going to get rid of those big corporate tax giveaways, and we're going to refocus our attention on giving families a bit of a break and on targeting our tax breaks to companies, to those companies that are creating jobs. And again, it's a matter of, yes, taxes need to pay for services and a number of other collective goods, if you will, of our society, but they need to be fair. And we have to make sure that families are doing okay, because once families are feeling positive about the future again, I think Ontario will be on the right track.
Do you consider yourself an environmentalist?
Absolutely.
I don't know an environmentalist out there who thinks that cutting the gas tax is an environmentally sensible idea. So why are you doing it?
Well, you know, the gas tax, the HST on gas was never an environmental policy. The HST was a policy that, in fact, if you look at it, the HST actually favors a lot of big polluters that are in the oil industry and others. And so what we're saying is get the HST off of gas, because there are so many people who have no choice. In the same time, though, we're taking 50% of the operating costs off of transit systems for municipalities, freezing transit fares, thereby making transit more affordable, but also giving cities the opportunities of increasing the transit available to people, increasing the number of routes, the number of trips, so that people can access transit more easily, get out of their cars. You know, we're also taking a huge amount of money that was set aside for planning of new nuclear build in Ontario, and we're shifting that to a program that gives people the tools to make green choices. Again, this is something that both the Pembina Institute and Greenpeace have supported as a very positive direction.
David Suzuki's come out for the Liberals.
Particularly on their green energy plan, and of course that was before we had put our environmental plan out there. But you know, it's something that it's all about choices, and I believe that it's really important to give people the tools to make those green choices. I don't believe in the stick approach. I never have. Even when when I was on City Council and I brought the green bin program into Hamilton, I was the chair of that committee, and our staff said at the time, you know, we have to charge people $25 to $30 for their green bin, and I said no, we're going to absorb that cost, because we don't want to punish them for doing the right thing. We want to encourage them to do the right thing, and that's the focus that I'm taking.
But I mean, if I understand the policy correctly, it is, if something costs more, people will use less. If you make gas more affordable, people will use it more, they will conserve less, they will be less green. Doesn't that make sense on the face of it?
But Steve, a lot of families don't have a choice. A lot of families in Ontario don't have a choice as to whether or not to take the car out of the garage. I mean, big parts of Ontario don't have the kind of choices that they should have as alternatives to the automobile. And so what we're saying is, let's not punish them for something they have no control over, and let's give them the tools to start making those green choices. And whether that's, you know, getting out of a car and going onto transit because we're helping cities to improve transit, or whether that means giving them the real tools to reduce their consumption by putting solar panels on, maybe increasing their insulation, getting those new doors and windows. Our rebate program and our loan and grant program for these retrofits is the tool that will help them to actually conserve and to reduce their bills.
Okay, last few minutes here, I want to tackle two more things. You know Hugh McKenzie, he's a longtime New Democrat Party supporter, and he's had some very tough things to say about you guys lately, namely that you have sold out, quote unquote, core NDP principles and values to battle the Conservatives for the populist vote. And he says in a game where the NDP and the Tories are fighting for the populist vote, you lose, they win. He doesn't want you fighting that fight. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, Mr. McKenzie can make any predictions or premonitions that he wants, but what my focus is to make sure that I'm responding to what people have been telling me for the last couple of years. I mean, you can't take on a leadership role and then just ignore what the people who you're purporting to be working for are saying to you. And when they're saying to you, you know, we need life to be more affordable for us, and when they're saying to you, we need good jobs in this province, and when they're saying to you, our healthcare system isn't meeting our needs, then shame on you if you're not paying attention to that. And so that's what I believe our platform does. It takes those practical first steps to start solving some of the real problems that people have facing them.
Last time you were in here, or maybe two times ago, I think 2009, you I asked you whether you self-identified as a socialist, and you said, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. You're not big on labels, but you admitted that. So to what extent is that the right word to use in describing the NDP platform this time out?
Well, I mean, it is about making life more fair for everyday folks. So I think that's quite in line with that fundamental value. It's about saying we shouldn't be giving huge corporate tax giveaways to companies that are shipping jobs out of Ontario while we watch families suffer to make ends meet. That's not really very fair. And so I think that our platform very much is in line with those fundamental values.
We like to talk almost all policy here, but we do talk a little politics every now and then, so I'm going to ask you one last thing about that. Okay. In 1985, there was an election where the Liberals came second, the NDP came third, but it was a minority government. And the third place Bob Rae NDP supported the second place Liberals under David Peterson and kicked out the first place Conservatives. Have you had any conversations among your team at this juncture if that scenario were to replay?
Frankly, no. At this point, we are very focused on bringing an option for real change to the people of Ontario. And you know what, Steve, whatever mandate they give me come October 6th, I'm prepared to fight for them. And I think there's plenty of time to figure out what that's going to be once it happens. But I don't want to presuppose any result whatsoever.
So you could support a Tim Hudak government if he comes first, Liberals are second, you're third, and it's a minority parliament.
Well, that kind of figuring out is something that people like on your side of the table do. People like me just try to work to get to the kind of mandate that we can actually implement our ideas.
So is that a maybe?
That's a conversation for maybe the panel that you're going to have after me.
Okay, that's fair enough. All right. Andrea Horwath, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight. As I say to all the leaders, good luck on the campaign trail, and we'll see you down the road.
It's my pleasure as always, Steve. Thanks.